I was never just an athlete. I was never just the job. It was how I approached the job. I was truly falling in love with how I was doing the thing more than, what the actual thing was.
Only real content is gonna last. All that other nonsense is here today and gone tomorrow.
How
It's a
you doing?
pleasure to be here.
For sure, for sure. I guess we could just start off by you just telling everybody who you are and just a little bit of your experience before we get started.
Well, my name is Daryle Hawkins. I'm a graphic designer, which obviously can mean a lot of different things in a world like today. But I work at Nike and I do graphic design for apparel, collabs, and get to represent Nike on behalf of the swoosh. It's a pleasure to be here.
For sure, for sure. I'd actually, just for context, before we go deeper into questions about some of the work you've done at Nike and even prior to that, I want to go back to even your story as like an athlete and the way like you came up. And I'd just like you to just speak a little bit more about that and your opportunities through athletics.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I mean, everybody has a backstory to how they got to where they got. And mine happens to be a little bit unique as far as how I ended up getting to Beaverton, Oregon at the swoosh. I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska, and my mom was an artist and my dad was a football coach. And so that ended up molding into me. And growing up, I was a quarterback coming out of Nebraska. I was getting decently heavily recruited. Like I was able to talk to, Dan Mullen, Urban Meyer, Jim Tressel, all these guys, like actually like getting recruited on a pretty decently high level. And I wanted to play quarterback at the next level. And so you could tell like that's 100% like where my mindset was at, especially coming out of Nebraska. I was like, I need to go somewhere that's going to take care of me, have an amazing collegiate experience, and be able to play the game because that was my 100% focus. I mean, they say like all athletes go pro in something else eventually. I was very much like, I'm going pro in sports, period. And it was my senior year. I'm getting recruited by all these guys, and they're all telling me the same things. Like, Darryle, you have a good season, good stats. You're going to officially get that first offer, and then they're all going to come rolling in. So I'm like, all right, bet 100% I'm ready to bring it this season. Senior year, we're returning state champs, the whole thing. Like, I'm ready. Second game of the season, second play of the game, I'm rolling out to the left. It's like super quick, easy play action pass roll out.
Right.
I'm coming around corner after the fake handoff. I see a D tackle who ended up being one of these guys that ended up committing to the University of Missouri. He comes barreling full speed at me, and I just do a quick little easy dump out to my fullback in the flat. But as I dump the pass off, I get caught right in my chest. And I fall on my shoulder. He falls on top of me, easily over 7 pounds of pressure. And that's all it takes to break a collarbone. And I go to get up, and my right arm is on fire. My throwing arm is on fire. But of course, like, I'm not thinking about that. I'm thinking like, I got to score these touchdowns. I got to put these stats. I got to get my scholarship. I got to do this.
Right. Facts.
So even though like my body is screaming, by somehow, some way, some miracle, I get up after that play and I throw 2 more touchdown passes. And we go in at halftime, and I'm like walking into the locker room like this. I'm hurting, they're like, hey, listen, man, we appreciate all that you're doing, but you got to get this looked at. So I ended up going to the hospital, like from the game. And they tell you the words that you never want to hear. Sorry, son, your collarbone's broken, your season's over. And just like that, like, I was completely lost. I mean, you talk about all your hopes and dreams just gone like that.
Facts.
Phone stopped ringing. Like, I didn't have a single D1 offer to finish the season. And that hurt. that made me like really reassess a lot of things in life as far as, you know, who I am, my own personal identity, like what I want to do. Am I going to go to a big D1 school anymore? Like that was my chance. I didn't produce. That was it.
Right.
And then by some miracle, the weekend before signing day, I get a phone call from a number that I didn't recognize, but a name that I surely did. And I pick up the phone and I answer it. It says, "Hey, this is Scott Frost with the University of Oregon." And I put it down. I was like, "Hold up, Scott Frost, like the Scott Frost, Nebraska football legend Scott Frost, like Heisman Trophy, the whole whatever, like national championships, like that legend Scott Frost. I'm a Nebraska kid. He's calling me." It's like, "Hey, Daryle, heard about everything that happened this season with your broken collarbone, you pushing through that. Like, that's the type of character that we need to have on our team. We'd love to offer you a full-ride scholarship to the University of Oregon." I was like, "You gotta be kidding me right now." Of course, on the phone, I'm trying to play it cool, like, "Oh yeah, well, you know, I gotta check with my people. I gotta talk to my mom, make sure it's okay."
Right. Let me talk to moms.
If everything plays out right, like you could probably see me there in the fall. And of course, when I hung up that phone, I about threw it through the window. I was so happy. Are you kidding me?
Right.
Like,
that's insane.
Nothing, absolutely nothing. Maybe D1 AA, you know, try and pull together some academic scholarships. Absolutely nothing to have a full ride scholarship going to one of the top tier programs in the nation, who unassumingly at the time, nobody had an idea like what that program was about to explode into, because Scott had also just recently taken the job at the University of Oregon, and he got asked to take the receiver coach's job by this guy named Chip Kelly, who was like, "Hey, I'm about to be the head coach of the University of Oregon. I think we're going to do something special here over the next couple of years." And I mean, if you guys know anything about sports, history writes itself from there. You know, national championships, Rose Bowls, rings, fastest team in America. And I think that influence, as far as like that hunger of me being able to go and like as an athlete prove myself there, and then learn everything as far as like habit, structure, discipline, going fast, being decisive. Those are things that I carry with me now that made me into the designer that I am today. And I think when you look at people's backstory specifically, and what do they draw upon that gives them their unique spin, like how do they approach work, how do they approach, you know, life in general, I think that's one of the pivotal cornerstone moments that you could see catalyzed my life in a completely different direction, where now I live on the West Coast, I'm in Oregon, I'm still contributing to sport and doing big things. However, there's a certain part of me that's always been there, as far as I recognize truly who I was, and that I'm a person who doesn't give up. And I will put myself out there and sacrifice and commit to the mission, regardless of what the circumstances look like. And given the opportunity, like, that's where you can succeed. I truly believe that, you know, as much as you may hear about overnight successes, a lot of times it's just talent meeting opportunity, you know, resilience meeting opportunity. And I think specifically, you know, to summarize my experience at the University of Oregon and getting into design and being able to fully commit to bringing both that world and my experience in sport, and being able to, you know, just share my point of view, my perspective, and how I uniquely design for athletes, for creators, for consumers. I think that same drive and energy of like, you know, being passionate for something that you would sacrifice your body for it, your heart, your mind, your belief, like this has to exist because like I was just made for this. I think that is one of the greatest things that you can possibly experience in this life. And I'm just happy to be able to share that. So yeah, man, that's a little bit about my backstory.
Yeah, you kind of even just went into like the next kind of thing I wanted to talk about. And because I was going to speak about, because Jay and I are also athletes ourselves, and take those same principles we learned through athletics and transfer them over to business. And you were able to do that as well. In like design, you talk about habit, structure, discipline, and it's obvious as you move forward in life that you still have to keep those structures in line if you want to stay successful towards that goal that you want to get in. And I was going to ask you, but then I thought about it, I was like, oh, he works at Nike. So I mean, like that, to be like because we see, like you said before, we see athletes always eventually turn pro in something, and so like you still see that athlete drive in the corporate world. And I feel like Nike is like the coolest, like I feel like, and you tell me if I'm wrong or tell me what your experience is, Nike being the place where there's a lot of that athlete energy of like keeping those like hard goals, and like we're all working as a team effort, and those like values really being drilled in a place like Nike rather than like a corporate office like another Microsoft. Corporate office, yeah. Right, Microsoft per se, right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think there's probably a couple different questions in that question, as far as like you talked about the transition of athlete to professional and something else. And I think, interesting enough, that happens to a lot of people in life. Especially, I think the hardest thing is a lot of people don't see that coming when, you know, you go from your teens to your 20s to your 30s. There are major life transitions that happen that will cause you to question, like, all right, I've put all my eggs into something. I've put all of this energy into one thing and it's over. The chapter is done on that. Where do I go from here? And for a lot of folks, that can be very like anxiety inducing, challenging, existential crisis, quarter life crisis, midlife crisis. Like it happens to people where it's like, all right, you know, life happens and things can change. Just like what happened to me. There's an opportunity for either I was going to continue football or not. And that happened to me at 17 years old, of like, this may be the last time you ever play football again. And it is already past tense. Were you prepared for that? No, I was not. And I think, fortunate enough, I still had the opportunity for that thread to continue, even though it was bleak in that moment. But that changed my perspective as far as like, not only do I need to understand that football is not permanent, but most importantly, that like football, although not permanent, is a part of who I am. And that is going to amalgamate into the truest form of myself. It was never about how I was a football player. It was about how I approached football. And I think when you learn that about yourself, it's not about what you do, it's about how you approach what you're doing. That's what makes you truly successful, when you don't lose yourself, when you're like, okay, well, I can't do this thing. I'm not an athlete anymore. You know, a relationship failed. I was never the relationship. I was never just an athlete. I was never just the job. It was how I approached the job. I was truly falling in love with how I was doing the thing more than, you know, what the actual thing was. Like the experience, 100% amazing. But when you find your true identity in yourself, it's about how I go about doing this thing, right? So that's what I was able to learn in colleges. You know, whether it was football or what ended up for me turning into design, I loved how I approached it, committed, diligent, the habits, the structure, the discipline. That was my edge, because that's core to who I am. So like, even though I was doing football, committed, you know, 5 a.m. workouts, super hardcore, running 7-8 miles of sprints every day. Then I go to school, habit, structure, discipline, committed to that. Where my senior year, I was driving from Eugene, Oregon, all the way to Portland 3-4 times a week, 300 whatever miles up to I-5 to get to class and then come back. Like that was easy because that was just part of who I was. Like the habits, the discipline, the structure, that was effortless because I was very passionate and believed in what I was doing. And I wasn't having to fight against like, you know, this is not who I am, or any other like external identity. Because if I wasn't a person who was interested in design or passionate about what I was doing or doing this to try and please somebody else, it wouldn't have worked. It would have been way too demanding to try and balance both. And even though it was hard and like challenging, I think there's a difference between things that are challenging and things that you're just struggling against. Right?
Yeah. Could you speak more on that actually?
Yeah. So I mean,
like that difference, that tension between them.
Yeah, things that are hard versus things that are challenging. I think when things are challenging, like that's when your inner competitive nature comes out, right? I think that's something that for athletes it's really easy to harness and bring out, because like that is so much a part of sport. Like if you are intimidated by going out and competing and playing the game, like you're not going to have fun. And like the competition of like being out there and having the opportunity to like shoot the basket, hit the shot, like pressure's on into you, like execute the thing. That is like the best part of playing the sport. It's like, you know what, anything can happen, but I believe that I could do it. And
you welcome that moment.
You welcome and honor that moment to be able to like go out and meet the challenge regardless of what happens. Like that is the thrill, versus when things are hard, that's when it's a grind. Oftentimes people, like you look at practice can be a grind because sometimes you just don't see the fruit of the challenge. Sometimes the thrill isn't there because you know it can get repetitive if it's not the moment, if it's not all on the line. Sometimes in practice it just doesn't feel, it feels hard because the stakes just aren't always there, you know what I mean? Or sometimes things are hard because like you're just not passionate about it. And I think a lot of times, like, you know, especially to bring it back to like work in corporate and all that type of stuff, oftentimes we have a job or a thing that we like and we love, like whether that's design. There are aspects of design that I'm 100% passionate about bringing concepts of new innovative ideas, and like I can do that day in and day out regardless of the weather or my mood. And then there are other things like sometimes it's just hard to put pen and paper and like flesh out all the ideas. Sometimes it's hard to just put all the numbers in the system to keep it going. Sometimes it's hard to get everybody to, you know, trudge all the way to the finish line so the vision is executed. Like sometimes those things that, you know, it's hard to necessarily infuse all the passion in, those are the things that are hard, but you bring them through the challenge, you know what I mean?
Right. I think I want to make the point of what you were saying earlier with your approach. Like that's what leads to the confidence in being able to execute in that moment. Like, and that's something that you really get from sports, because like you being a quarterback, right? You're in charge of the game. Like you revel for that moment to be able to come through for the team. And so like that transferring now, like with graphic design, like it's like, oh, like we have this new project, like let's get it. I can't wait to take on this new thing. And you already know that you're going to be successful at it. Like you're like, yeah, the hard stuff to practice is whatever, because you have this approach. And like I think that's something that really echoes through just because of like the sports thing. I think like everybody that's been at a high level of like athletics kind of feels what you're saying to some extent. And yeah, like I don't know, it's cool to hear also like the transition of design and how that kind of also can play a role in going from sports to design. Like how it doesn't have to be like limited into like a certain category. These skills in life like apply everywhere, type of thing.
Absolutely.
And
I think it's to build on that. I've talked with a bunch of different people as far as like how could you translate like what sports does as far as being an excellent communicator, being a better team player, being resilient, diligent, focused, all these things that are like true intangibles that you would want in an employee, a coworker. Like how do you quantify that as in like, you get a sports degree certificate for competing at a high level and then translating that to the workforce. I think it's definitely hard because a lot of those soft skills, like people don't recognize fully how important they are. As far as like, you know, when you look at job descriptions and resumes and things like that, a lot of it is just proving that, like, can you do the job? Do you have the credentials of like, I've done this before, can you do the job? And as someone who's hiring people, or like if you're looking for employees, not only do you want someone who can do the job, but you want someone who can excel at the job, expand on the job, and you want someone who helps to build out your team more. And I think oftentimes that is a lot more challenging prospect, to try and find someone who helps build out your team. But when people have the soft skills of like, I work well and hard under pressure, and I always bring a positive attitude every day, and when, you know, the weather changes, I'm not going to bail on you, and like all those things are like, those are the intangibles that you need to have to be a great athlete. Those are the same intangibles that you need to have to be successful at anything in life. And oftentimes sport is the quickest way to, you know, just see those things manifest in people. Of like, yeah, if it's cold and brutal and bitter outside, like, can you go out and, you know, hit, run, chase the ball? Like, as simple and rudimentary as that is the same challenge in a lot of ways. Is like, all right, when the days are long and you're not feeling up to it and the stress is whatever, it's the same kind of challenge to a certain degree of like, can you execute when it's time?
And I think what I just kind of understood for myself, and really kind of taking the metaphor of business like sport and being on a team as well, is kind of like when you leave school to go into the game of life, those intangibles and those people that put in that work are the people who play, because you could still win a ring on the bench, but like, you have a ring, but how much does it mean because you didn't play? You know what I'm saying? You could have still been on the team, but like athletes, when you look at legacy, it's like, well, did they play? Did they contribute? Did you hit that three at the end of the game? Or were you sixth man of the year? Like, what like role did you play within that game is based on those intangibles that you build in practice and in just the experience of playing the game. Yeah, that really came through. All right, so that was really dope. I want to actually kind of get into, you already spoke a little bit about your transition, just as far as like a mindset wise, from sports to design. But I know that just as much as football, and I'm sure rehabbing and getting back into that was a struggle, like design and stuff, having to put those habits and structure and discipline in there was also a learning experience. And I want to kind of ask, from like when you got into design and everything like that, and it was towards the latter years of your college days, how did the opportunity come up to potentially work for Nike, and potentially just do your game of design at the highest level?
Yeah. So I mean, to summarize my story in like the late years of my career, I had an opportunity to go pro, and I didn't get drafted, but I was invited to training camp with the Chicago Bears. I ended up getting cut, and as the story goes, that was when I hung up my cleats. But of course, in that moment, there was, you know, the same kind of crossroads that I had in high school of like, all right, what do you do now? Like, I got cut, I could go to Canada, I could go to arena ball, I could keep trying to call people up with my agent and just like sit out. And now what was different about this time, other than it just being later in life and teams are different, was I also had design. And since I had invested time into doing design and had the opportunity to, you know, see where that was going to take me, I said, I think it's time to go to design. And so I ended up working for a startup in a couple of different places where I got to have some different kind of experiences as far as understanding how business works in general, as far as, there is design, but design sits as a function as part of like the greater hierarchies in business, which is,
Right.
you have sales, marketing, accounting, operations, and like those are the arms that make the business function. And that's where I was able to start understanding, like, all right, how does design holistically fit into operating a business? And like where design is like a tool to meet an end, as much as you can bring the artistry and all that passion into it, like you have to understand the mechanics of the machine in order for it to work best, right? Understand your purpose in the machine.
Right. And how to communicate through it.
Exactly. And how to communicate through
Yeah.
it. So I got to learn a lot through startup. And oftentimes when you work in startups, you get to wear many hats. So like I was designer, but I was also like booth fabricator, shipper, salesman, data entry
Producer.
analyst, like the whole nine,
Right.
developer, everything. And that was great experience, but oftentimes like what you learn in, startups, whether they're successful or not, is you have to cash flow properly. And so I think that was one of the biggest challenges of me in that role there. It's just like, it wasn't cash flowing well. And so I was able to look for different opportunities. And one of those opportunities was a contract role with Nike. And when I tell everybody my story, like, how did I get in? I have the most unconventional story that anyone has. Because usually people are like, oh yeah, you know somebody and you contact somebody and then you do a bunch of meetups.
Right.
And
well, this is why you on different podcasts.
Yeah, you do some informationals, you get on podcasts and say like, hey, I'm looking to do this thing. If you got opportunity, let me know. Right. And I did not do that. I applied online through like some staffing agency and they're like, hey, we know just the job for you. It's Nike. And I was like, what? Like totally not even on my radar. Like, Nike? Doing what? Like design. Okay, when's the interview? Right. Tomorrow. And they give me this phone call at like 7-8 o'clock at night. I was like, tomorrow? Like I gotta drop everything tomorrow? Like, yep, 9 a.m. And you have to have full presentation ready and everything. It's like,
oh my goodness.
Yeah. So of course I was like, all right, have it, structure, discipline, put it together, be prepared. Like when, it is the same thing as in sports when it's like next man up. If you're the backup quarterback and it's the first game of the season and you're a true freshman and the starting guy goes down, they're like, hey, we're burning your red shirt. You're running the team this year. Like there is no difference in like, you know what? Are you prepared? You're as prepared as you're going to be. Go out, execute. This is your opportunity. This is your chance to be a overnight success, right? Like just go and get after it. And you know what? Did pretty well in that interview. They're like, hey, we think we could find a spot for you here. And then from there, they just kept feeding me more and more projects until, you prove your salt. You're like, all right, bring me some more, execute, bring me some more. And so I went from, working on like soccer and lacrosse to then my own sport and football to then designing uniforms and football jerseys for the actual clubs and teams themselves, from the Oregon Ducks to the Chargers to whoever, to now working on collabs with, the Drakes and the Jim Takashis and the Virgils and like all the big heads that come through Nike. Like it's been, it's been great. Just keep feeding me. Feed the rock.
That's facts, man. And so I guess that'll just segue perfectly into, as you said, like you started kind of on, I was like soccer and lacrosse, got to do football, in which we got to highlight. You went to Oregon and got to design one of the Oregon Ducks uniforms. That's just dope. That's just really cool. We just got to say that just to make sure people understand. That's really dope. But yeah, could you explain to the people what your current role is and what you do now?
Yeah. So my my current role as it stands is I work in the Catalyst team. And if you've heard of like Nike Lab, ACG, and ISPA, you know, I essentially work in special projects for graphic design and apparel design. And as special projects come through, whether it's working with external collaborators, which everyone's very familiar with, the Nike by whoever collabs that we do, and just some of the unique internal explorational stuff that we do on the side, like I'm at the precipice of graphic design with my team, and it is absolutely everything that you would think it is.
Right. Well, I guess going from there, like you said, you got to work with the Tekashis, the Virgils, the Drakes on behalf of Nike. Like what was like, can you give us like either the most like inspiring, I guess we'll start off with like, what was the most like inspiring thing that you either experienced or got to work on, or anything in that realm?
Yeah, well, I will say, because all that stuff is very confidential, that one of the best parts about working with collaborators and just people who come into the Nike office in general, who bring their own unique perspective, is 100% a unique perspective. And I think oftentimes, like, you know, you've heard of like lifestyles of rich and famous, and just creative artists who have their own unique way of looking at the world. And I think oftentimes like that is what is the most truly inspiring thing, is watching all these people who come through who are collaborators get really excited about what they're excited about. You know, it's there's nothing more magical than seeing someone like fully engrossed in their passion and then like excelling in their craft, whether they're a musician or an entertainer, a comedian, you know, actor, actress, designer, creative. Like when you see someone just hit that flow state in their craft, they're like, I'm loving this, I'm feeling this, and I'm passionate about this. Like that story tells itself. And the best part about, I guess the most inspiring part about working with collaborators is those people almost just live in that state on a day-to-day basis of, you know,
Right.
I'm sure that everyone's got the hard stuff that they have to do, and there's definitely the challenges, but when it comes to being able to sing in your craft and just be like, you know what, this is me and this is my expression, all those people can bring it every single time. Like, this is me. And that definitely, you know, I love and respect and appreciate that part about my job. And I think there's a lot of people out there too that, you know, maybe don't have the profile figurehead like audience that all these people have, but I think there's definitely something similar in a lot of people. Like there's a true authentic version that you can speak about yourself that resonates and that needs to get out because it is inspiring.
For sure. But I guess just in all of like your work so far, could you give, and it doesn't have to be a super specific one, but just do you have like a favorite project that you like hang your hat on or love to tell people that you worked on, or just hold in your room like, this is, I can't believe I worked on this one, or this one was so cool?
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, I got a couple of those. I'll tell you two different ones. I think one of the, I mean, there's certain projects that like just get you really hyped. Like this is really tight. It's speaking to me like you're able to like pull a part of yourself, and you know, ideally it's the best part of you, and then you put that into the design and it just gets to resonate and everyone's like, yes, I connect to that. That's a shared human experience, and that's just, it's really cool. I appreciate what you did there. And I feel like I was able to do that for my team in the Oregon jerseys that they're currently wearing this year. It's
Facts.
I think it's really tight. I feel like I've been able to pull an amalgamation of like some of the stuff that was really impactful for me when I was there, as far as like the wings on the helmet, the color shift, and like when I first got there, we were wearing diamond plate and everything still too. So like that was the OG days. So there's a little bit of elements of the diamond plate with the auxetic pattern, and speaking to the innovation that we had first kind of started with, as far as like how can you build and reinforce the jersey itself so that way they're like more indestructible, but then also speak graphically to the elements of the team, which like if you look on the jerseys, there's this pause negative of the wing shape, like of wings in the jersey, but then it's also plated, and then has like some sneaker elements and like tags with the duck, and just brings in some of the storytelling as far as like you know almost turning the jersey into like this sneaker slash memento to a lot of the big airs like across the history of Oregon, as we've been successful in like this innovative way that speaks to just like the new technologies that we've been coming out with, and also the history of the team. Like I feel like it was a good marriage of my experience and all the things that I've loved about Nike and what Nike brings to Oregon and vice versa. So that's been like really special to me, is like no matter what, that has had a place to live and is on field, and the kids who are out there wearing it and doing their best in it, like it gets to be a part of their story and their legacy. And I look forward to whatever it's going to be in the future, but I got to be able to have this little capsule in time. I'd say that got me really hyped, like to do that and kind of give part of myself back to the team in my perspective. One of the most meaningful would probably be though, I worked on this project. We have an internal project that generates a lot of money for charity, and it's called Dornbecker. And we have a Dornbecker Hospital, which is in Portland, downtown. And I got to work with this girl named Chloe. She's absolutely amazing. She has cystic fibrosis. And yeah, it was incredible because I got to be someone else's designer who's like not normally a designer, as another collab essentially. But this is the first time I was able to help someone design who is a little person. Chloe was 9 years old at the time. She's very passionate Pacific Northwest fan. So on all her stuff, she's like, I wanted to reference Russell Wilson, Marcus Mariota, Damian Lillard, and she's a huge sports fan. She's a big soccer basketball player. And obviously it is partially tragic because of her sickness, she's not able to do all those things that she wants to do. However, that passion and that will and that drive and that perspective definitely hasn't dissipated at all just because of her condition. And I think being able to tell her story and then also be able to like design for her and just help express everything that she has coming from within, that was truly it was one of the more meaningful things that I've done, as far as like I get to help people every day kind of like flesh out the ideas that they have in their mind. And there's some people that are so purely passionate that you're just like, every word that you can hang on is like pure gold and just speaks for a passion of life, and like you just need to make this thing come into existence. I feel like with Chloe, like that was 100% like, yeah, this needs to happen. I am 100% like, I am with the vision. This needs to be real. And Chloe, I will probably say it into the end of my days, like she's one of the best art directors that I had, and she was 9 years old. And I think like, I don't know, it's hard to describe, but I would say there's just certain levels of passion that are unmatched. And I think passion comes from when you have like a thirst and a gratitude for life. And Chloe definitely had that 100%.
Yeah, man, that second story was amazing too, because you don't really get to hear a lot of stories just about the opportunity, because you were able to do that through working for Nike. And so I feel like when you're thinking about, oh, like even like if you're in school and you say, oh, I want to go work for a big company, I don't know, I feel like you just don't get to hear a lot of like the opportunities that you have to work with foundations and actually really use your skill and use the resources that you have to make a big impact on people's lives. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, gosh, it's really challenging to like narrow down to just a couple of
Right,
projects
just a
because they've all
couple.
been meaningful. Like,
Right.
Can you just
I've given
name
a
a
part of
couple
myself
real
to
quick,
all of them.
just to let the people know like what it is? Like, just name a couple that you've worked on.
Okay, so like football teams I worked on, TCU, the Chargers. I also worked on the Ducks, of course. I've done some of the elite high schools, like the Modern Days, and um, like had the opportunity to help with Bishop Gorman and like a couple of different things. I've done like sideline graphics and T-shirts and like the on-field like championship T-shirts and things like that when everybody's standing on the podium, like being able to get back to that moment.
Right.
Beyond that, like being able to work on some of the hype drops that drop on sneakers and other different custom graphics and like yeah, it's funny because there's so many things that Nike does, and I think oftentimes like it's just part of the whole experience of the brand. And
Right.
I'm just very grateful that like across the plethora of things I've been able to work on and like build part of myself into, I feel like the parts of myself that I'm putting in the project are the parts of myself that I see in everyone else. Where I'm like, you know what?
Right.
I know this is going to resonate because like there's so many people who had this shared experience with sport that like they're just going to get it. As an athlete,
Right.
having that competitive edge and being able to be like, yeah, I'm gonna put this shirt on because it makes me feel like a boss. Like
Right.
that's sometimes need to live in the energy of the shirt. Like, yes, that's what I am and what I'm about. And so when people go to buy that thing, they're buying a part of themselves.
Right.
That's what
That's facts, and that's the beauty of design. That's what design allows us to do.
Touching on like they're
yeah.
buying a part of yourself, and yeah, like can you expand on how design in your own life kind of transcends more than just like the graphics? Like
Oh,
how does design play a role in more than like even just like psychologically too? We're talking about approach, but yeah.
yeah. I mean, so like everything is designed for the most part at one point. Like everything that is in existence, someone had to come up with the idea that like, all right, this is how the thing is. Whether it's like a brush or your computer or whatever, like whether someone had to first think of that thing. And the crazy part is like all design is also a work in progress. So like great design, like truly great, impactful design is actually only just design that is the most appropriate for the time that it's in, right? So, gosh, I'm trying to think of like, you know, like there's some great designs that stand the test of time where like it's just been so good for so long, like no one's been able to think of anything better. Like scissors or snaps or a zipper or whatever. Like some of those things are just like so utilitarian that it's just like no one's been able to figure out something better than that. And then there's great design that's sort of like that was just the best that we had at the time and is really impactful and meaningful. And there's like cultural equity in those things. Like I think of like vinyl records. Like that was totally like a thing of it was unique in that you can make sound out of this giant CD and like that was the best crisp sound that we could make at the time. And there are people who are so like enthralled and like love that experience so much that even though we have technology where you can live stream whatever 50 million songs that you want, people will still go back to vinyl records because of the experience that it creates. That's just like 100% unique, and that is a part of people now. And I think like that is just one example of an iteration of something that was like work in progress. And I think the most special part about design is like trying to make something that is appropriate for the moment. Like with everything that you have, you could always make it better. You could always do more. You could always add another feature on it. You could always take away another feature for the most part. But like, what is the most appropriate thing for the now? I think either Apple or somebody called it like that, is the Maya principle, the most advanced yet acceptable. And like when you're able to bring that, that makes truly successful design. And you know, if you're able to bring that and it's able to be for an extended period of time, like that's when you have like groundbreaking design, right? And I think how that relates to me and my approach and what design has meant for me in my life, I think as a creator, I'm very grateful that in my human existence experience, I get to contribute to things that motivate people and empower people and help them do better in sport. I get to help people find and experience more of themselves and like certain perspectives and personalities that they had that they didn't even know they resonated with until they were able to be like, you know what, this shirt speaks to me, or like this design, something about it's like that is cool. And oftentimes when people recognize like something that's cool or it's interesting or it's intriguing, it's because it's working and challenging them in a way that's like, this is visually stimulating and I can appreciate it because like it is speaking to some part of me that finds it intriguing. And I think like as far as like what that means for me, that just continues to feed my own perspective of like finding the things in life that are truly invigorating and stimulating, and kind of having that childlike wonder of like there are so many things that you can pay attention to that will capture your eye, and you can explode that and bring that to like the greater audience of people like, hey, did you notice this thing? Did you notice that there are grooves on the back of this thing? And you can build that into design as far as like there's some little things that you can build in where people will just like notice and appreciate it, and then you can blow it up super big as like a abstract artistic expression of like, you're not gonna miss it if I make it like this freaking big, because like you'll just be able to take in the art of it, you know?
Thanks.
Yeah.
No, that's a great explanation. I wanted to just say something real quick. I know I just want to say a joke real quick. We all have brushes right next to us. I know we all do.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay, so yeah,
right?
this is part of the African American Afro-diasporic experience, right?
Yeah, I was like, you pulled out the brush. I was like, I know we all got brushes on our desk right now.
Which is funny, but it's totally like those things that I know are on a subconscious level we all understand because like it's just part of the experience, right? And it's another point of design that we can all connect on.
Exactly.
And I think like when you have great design and you look at building new designs and building things that are going to, you know, eventually come out in the future, like that's the other part of design, is like you are creating something that typically does not exist yet. It hasn't been brought into the world, and you're going to bring something into the future that ideally that you can hand to other people and they'll be like, yes, thank you, I appreciate that. This is something that totally like we didn't have, and you brought it into existence, and it's worth it. Like, thank you.
Right.
Exactly. One of my favorite design quotes was from Virgil. He said, "Everything is editable," and that really made me think, because I was like, "Wow, like like we're talking about the brush, or let's say like a tower fan or like a room fan. How many iterations that's gone? Now we got like Dyson bladeless stuff and whatever." And yeah, I kind of wanted to ask too, like, because that was such an inspiring quote to me. Like Virgil said, everything is editable, and like you've gotten a chance to work with him, and like, what has that experience been like? Have you gotten any cool gems from working with Virgil and whatever collabs you've done with Nike?
I mean, gosh, like I've gotten so many. I I need to put them all in a notebook, honestly. Like how many unique everything. Um, yeah, that's kind of it's a hard one to come up with like right off the top. I might have to get back to you on that one, but I will say, as far as like cool gems about design and like approaching design, I think like everything is edible is definitely a good one. Probably like one of the most important ones. It's like uh maybe it was my art director. Somebody said like design is never finished. Like you just have paused it. And I think that's another expression of everything is editable. And I think to be able to like look at the world and as daunting as that could be of like, yeah, everything is editable. Like you can fix, you can change it. Like, should everything be editable? Is it appropriate to edit everything? I think that's one also unique perspective that you can take at things like what are things that need to be fixed, or what are things that need to be edited, and what are things that don't need to be edited. I think when you look at like life, and when you start finding your passions, oftentimes your passions lead you to finding those things where like, yeah, someone needs to make that thing, someone needs to make a new rendition of this song, or like mix these two things together, or like make this video game, or build this business. Like that's the larger expression of like, is it editable?
Mm-hmm. I'm really liking that we're talking about the philosophical kind of ways around design, but I want to ask kind of more like, especially for like because I mean this show is navigating now, it's really meant for younger people that are kind of looking up to people like you and people who work at the highest level. So as far as like a habit structure discipline, could you like give some advice to like young designers on like how you, for even just personally, set up habits and structure and discipline around designing that have helped you in your career, and being able to hit those shots when they pass you the ball, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And just consistently.
Habit, structure, and discipline. So habits are everything that you do without consciously thinking of it. And ideally, the good habits that you can have around design is, very, very simple stuff as far as like being organized is probably the biggest one I see with a lot of creatives. When you have a creative mind, it's very easy to like get your stuff everywhere. But the best creatives are the ones that can take the blue sky and organize it so that way people can like see it.
Right.
So if you can be organized with your thoughts and have a habit of being able to take the complex abstract and organize it into like, this is the purpose. Like that is an amazing habit to get into. I'd say the other habit is like document your stuff. If there's anything that you can learn about social media and business and like all the information that's on the internet, if you are in the habit of taking photographs, doing video vlogs, and writing things down, journaling, like I think it's Jim Rohn said it. It's important to be a student of yourself. I think being able to have the habit of documenting yourself and your process and like all those things, it makes it easier for you to share information, share your ideas, and then also go back and like learn from yourself as far as like, all right, how did I approach this problem? Like, what was my thought process? How was I thinking about this? Is there a way that I can study myself to like think on it differently? I think even like breaking down habit, structure, and discipline and all that, like in building that speech that I did for my TED Talk, a lot of that was studying myself and being like, what has truly been.
I couldn't hear what you said.
Thank you, Siri. what has truly been important as far as like my perspective and what I've learned through this process, like in going fast and like accomplishing the things, like what was the real differentiator? Like it wasn't purely just like talent and I had the skills, which I think a lot of people think like, oh yeah, to be successful, you just have to have the physical ability to do the thing and to, you know, have the physical talent to be there and be in the opportunity. And it's like,
Right.
that is like one small part of the equation, right? Like the ability, the potential to do it is not the same as like completing the task. You have to have the potential, then you have to have the will, then you have to have the opportunity all together. And those things create the success. And you can count on potentially like, if you don't have the skill, it probably makes it really hard for the other two to happen in general. But you can have all the skill in the world, but if you don't have the will to go out there and like make it happen, and if the opportunity just doesn't present itself, or you give up on looking for the opportunity, you will not be successful.
Right. For sure, for sure. And I even while you were speaking, I even thought of like using sports analogies, like even as simple as like you won't get the opportunity, meaning they won't throw you the pass, they won't throw you the oop, pass you the ball in the corner if they don't believe that you can make it, and or if they don't even like you. You know what I'm saying? They're like, oh, we know, we've all been on teams where it's like, yeah, we don't really like him, but like he plays because he's good. You know what I'm saying? And so it's even just like the little things and how you treat people, and even just like how you treat yourself in the whole process. Because I remember when we first met, I kind of asked you some questions around just as a young designer, like about tools that you use, and you said something about just in the kind of objectively kind of talked about the tools, i.e. Photoshop, Illustrator, Adobe, whatever you want to use, are just tools to be able to materialize what is already existed in the imagination. And it really helped me understand that, like, really, I mean, you could use whatever tool you want, but the main tool, the limitless tool that you have, that we all have, is the imagination. So like the more you can refine your own imagination, the more it's going to translate way easier. And you can be like, oh, you create a model in your head and then you already know the tools. Then it becomes just a task of learning which tools to use, you know?
Absolutely.
I just really wanted to make that point.
Yeah, to build on that, like we had talked about that a little bit before, as far as like the tool and how the tool is an expression of the imagination. And I think a lot of times when people are trying to learn a new tool, or specifically like you see all the time on Instagram or social media or whatever, you know, someone takes this amazing photo and they're like, what lens did you use? What camera did you use?
Right.
And it's like the lens, the camera is only 20% of what the photo actually is. The photo is being able to stand there in the moment, holds whatever tool you're using, be in the frame and capture the moment. And they're like, that is 80% of being a good photographer, is having the vision to see the thing and then take the photo, right?
Yeah.
And regardless of what camera you use, you can have the perfect camera and the lens and put it all in the settings. And if you're taking a picture of a white wall and it's not an interesting picture of a white wall, it's not gonna be a good picture. Ideally, it's best if you can have both, and that's where like master craftsmen come together. But the way that they got to like, oh yeah, I got this camera and this lens, is they just bought a camera one day and they're like, all right, I'm figuring out, like, I'm loving these pictures that I'm taking. How do I get it where that way like the background is out of focus but the front is better in the foreground? How do I get it where the colors are more vibrant? How do I get it where like I can get some blur over here but then like change whatever is over here? And that's how you learn the tools. As far as when you get into the minutia of like mastering the craft, you pick up the tools along the way to learn the skill. So same with like Illustrator and Photoshop. Like if you're learning Illustrator, you got to be like, all right, what am I trying to do? I need to make a logo. okay, how do I make a logo? I'm probably going to need to figure out how to learn Illustrator so that way I can make these shapes and put these shapes together to
Right.
make a logo. Okay, like what kind of thing am I trying to do? Like, all right, I can use those tools to build whatever because I need to build an Illustrator so it can do this, this, and this. I think a lot of people get confused or they get really daunted and like, I don't know the questions to ask to get to the result that I want. And oftentimes the most successful people are the people who can ask the best questions. So I'm trying to achieve X. Oftentimes, like you need to go to somebody else who has done X and then say, all right, this is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to be like you, or I'm trying to do this thing, or even figure out like, this is the thing I want to do. What questions should I be asking to be able to even figure out like, how do I become more like you? And oftentimes that person will be like, well, listen, in the beginning, these are the questions that I had to ask. Or in the beginning, I met a teacher, and these are the things like, if you don't know this, you're going to struggle. If you don't know how to use the hammer on the back end with the wood bit, you're going to struggle hitting the nail and you're going to get hurt. Like those are like the little questions that you get along the way. And then you say, okay, well, teach me. I want to do this. How do I get there? And then you just build on your questions like, all right, I want to finesse it more. What tools do I need to learn? And in that constant curiosity, that's when people become excellent master craftsmen. They have like the perfect whatever filter, get to that thing that's like unique perspective, whatever is in that curiosity. They've just gone so deep down the rabbit hole that they figured out that little differentiator that makes them great. And sometimes like whether you're following your passion or not often differentiates when people get to that level of curiosity, because it takes a passionate curiosity to get there. Like if you're just doing it for clout and not out of your own like curious imagination, you're going to give up at like 2 phases in there as far as like, all right, I'm asking this question, I'm asking this question. If I need to ask 50 more questions to get to the cool thing, like I'm going to be exhausted because I don't think it's getting me closer to what I really want, which is something else.
Right.
And that's okay. But if you want to get the thing, you got to ask the right question to get the thing, right?
Right. It's like a key to the door, really. You got to know it's the spell, literally the spell. But anyways, to build on that, I remember I heard, I forgot exactly where I heard it from, but someone who said that like the flow state, or what we call the flow state, isn't a state of learning. It's a state of being. And so to be able to, like you said, we see the Kanyes, the Virgils, and you speak about it. It's so crazy to see them in just like flow state, just like bam, bam, yes, that, and it looks like they're not even thinking about it. To be able to get there, their body is kind of already habituated into, through habit, through discipline and structure, habituated into not even have to think about it. Because like even all athletes know there was a time where you did a play and it was the coolest play you did and you're like, oh, I really wasn't even thinking about it. Like it just happened. Like, but you wouldn't have been able to do that unless you did all of those cone drills where you did that move 1,000 times, so much to where your body knew what to do before your mind had to think about it. And that's flow state.
Yeah.
And I really think that's like what we're talking about here, and what we all admire as creators, designers, and even consumers. We admire that. And so, yeah, I think it's just important to distinctualize that, because like everyone kind of fantasizes like the flow state, but there's not a lot of talking about like, well, then how do I get there? Are some people just born with it? Right. What is it? Like, I guess LeBron just is always in flow state, or I just, you know what I'm saying? But there's a path. There's a path. Like we should definitely like speak more about the path. But yeah.
Yeah. There is a path. And I think you kind of alluded to it, like the path, or at least you can build into the path by having consistent structure. Like habit, structure, and discipline, they're not exactly like three completely different concepts as much as they are like a set of circles that
Like
build into each
framework.
other, like
Right.
all part
Right.
of the same like scope, if you will. So
Mm-hmm.
the structure is what's going to help you like get back into flow state, right? Discipline is
Mm-hmm.
what's going to help you get back into flow state. Habits are
Right.
what are going to get you back into flow state. Where if you have
Mm-hmm.
good habits that are built in your structure, and then your structure is going to spur you in the certain times of the day to get back into your good habits, and the discipline is also
Mm-hmm.
going to help you maintain your structure and your habits. Like it all feeds
Mm-hmm.
into itself.
Right.
Well, you'll continually stay in flow state. Like I said, like of
Mm-hmm.
the habits you should have as a good designer is being organized. Like if you have the discipline and the structure to put those things together, it makes it a lot easier to hold that habit, right?
Right.
And vice versa.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Yeah, they definitely all work together. All right, so I guess another kind of topic I wanted to get into, even further than your work at Nike, you've done some freelance work on the side, and even we spoke about you created your own t-shirt brand once upon a time. Um, could you just tell us about your freelance work? And even though like you've worked at Nike, the biggest conglomerate, working with the biggest people, just your experience of your own stuff and what you've learned from that.
Absolutely. Um, yeah, where to start? I think for a lot of people, especially if you get like deep into corporate or if you come straight out of school into corporate, um, one of the blessings and curses of being at a large company or even being on a large team is everyone has to specialize, right? And I think
Mm-hmm.
one of the things I spoke about earlier in my journey in business and like work in my career was the ability to wear multiple hats. And I think um, perspective wise, being able to run your own business, do your own t-shirt company, drop ship, Shopify, whatever, gives you a better understanding of how the whole system works as far as
Right.
like you understand the different cogs in sales and marketing and operations and legal, and you have just a better perspective of like how the business can function ultimately. And I think at the end of the day, like Nike is here to make a big impact. The best way that they can make an impact is by being a successful business, so that way they can continue to feed and support their consumers, right? If you
Right.
don't fully understand that precipice, then oftentimes like people in corporate structures struggle and headbutt against their teammates because they're conflicting in the vision, right? And so to
Right.
be able to like understand that and like holistically understand the pressures of like, all right, as a project manager and designing my t-shirt company, what am I thinking versus as a designer and trying to get my idea through, like what am I thinking versus as a merchandiser and trying to fit this in the whole collection on the website, like what am I thinking? Like those are completely unique perspectives that in a corporate setting, those are completely different faces who all have different voices
Taken
who
care of.
speak to the team. And that's what like makes a
Mm-hmm.
corporation successful is you have everybody, you know, essentially lobbying on behalf of the role versus, you know, in a small business type setting, you kind of have one person who has to wear all those hats and then figure out within themselves which voice is the loudest. And like the fact that you can be in corporate and you can focus on your one voice is beneficial to the business, but also doesn't necessarily grow you because you only get used to thinking one type of way versus in the, you know, in the pressures of running a small business, you have to wear all the hats. In order for the small business to be successful, you have to take on those perspectives and you feel the psychological, emotional pressures that you wouldn't otherwise feel in the other setting. And so I think like that was one of the big things that I wanted to get out of designing my t-shirt business. And then also like, you know, the challenge of like, all right, let's use your skill and bring it to market? Is there something unique that you can bring as far as like, different graphic design, different expressions, more experimental stuff that like might not be able to work over here at Nike, but totally like there's a market for, there's a reason for that to exist. I think that's a core part of being a creative person and being like expressionistic is there are some things that like you need to make for the sake of making them. And I think like as much as I love design, like that's a certain amount of like pure artistic expression that like the world needs to continue having the conversation. I'm trying to remember who was it on Abstract who had this like really good diagram as far as like the difference between engineering, like design, and like communication, whatever, and art. And the biggest difference between like design and art was design is communicating the idea, and then art is questioning the idea. And I think it's important for us as a society to continue to have art, whether it's abstract or people don't get it, or like it's rude and offensive, or I don't understand why this exists, because it helps people to continue to question the idea of like, if everything's editable, should this thing be edited? And when people make something that's like, that's garbage, or like, oh no, that toilet's not supposed to be there, or like this thing doesn't exist in that space, it helps people have the conversation of like, well, why doesn't it? Like defend it now, or question why you think the way that you think. And there's some people who love to live in that space of like question everything, and some people who hate to live in that space of like, I need structure and like dependable whatever. But I think even still, regardless of whatever side you're on, it's important to have those questions, because that breaks into the new, that builds out the new design that's going to be, the answer to that question that maybe nobody was asking. Like the old Henry Ford model of like, if I would have asked people what they wanted, I would have just built them a faster horse. And somebody questioned it of like, why can't we build this? Why can't we get to places like in a machine? Or why can't we like just take all this hunk of metal and turn it into a cart that like rolls by itself? Someone had to question that with the art of like, I want my wagon to just go, instead of having to feed all these horses every day. And someone like guarantee had an artistic expression, or there was some person, some welder who was like, imagine this like toy wagon thing that like, what if it just rolled itself? Or some little kid who's playing with wheels, and then eventually they're like, oh yeah, we can make this a thing. And that's where you get into the conversation of like the engineering, and then you build into the actual full design of like, all right, let's make it function so that it communicates exactly how it's supposed to work to the end person. And then someone who finally gets to the end version of that thing, and then we have a car, they question it to being like, all right, well, what if the whole thing was electric instead of gas? What if the car drove itself? What if, however many years in the future, like it drives itself and it speaks to the cloud and does whatever different thing on Mars? And like it just continues to go on and on and on.
Yeah, you said something.
I think you're really
huge. No, you said something huge when you said design communicates the idea, art questions the idea. Like as soon as you said that, I wrote that down. That's like our gem of the day. That was great. And like off of that, one of my other favorite quotes by Daniel Arsham, he says, "Make the things you need to see exist in the world." And that's so important that like I think everybody take that to heart, because that's how we progress as humanity, like having that zeitgeist.
And really off that point, I was gonna say, I feel like you were really describing like as all of us being creators, we are going through a Renaissance period. We can call it an Enlightenment period, Renaissance period. We'll call it whatever it'll be called after it's over. We'll know what it's called. But the time we're living through right now is exactly the process that you described about, well, especially after 2020, we're having to look at the structures that we had been in and be like,
And look at the
are these
habits.
right?
Yeah.
Like, we'll look at the habits and be like, are these the ones that we want to continue to? Because we have the awareness that we created the structure, and so it's like, all right, well, are these structures serving us in our highest purpose, or can we make something better, evolution, progression to then fit what everybody needs at the time? You know what I'm saying? So
Absolutely.
yeah, for sure. I actually, speaking of like the future, I actually remembered that question I forgot like way back.
Yeah.
And it was really about just kind of like your perspective is really unique because you get to work like really close to these people that are on the cutting edge of innovation and design. What do you I'm interested in just your perspective about the uptick in collaboration that we're seeing. As you get to work on Nocta, which is like Drake's line, and like Off-White and stuff, and other collections, like, and you're starting to see even like Jerry Lorenzo is now about to do Adidas, and Kanye's doing Gap. Like, what do you think about, what's your perspective on kind of seeing this emergence of culture and corporate really happening, especially now?
Yeah, I mean, that's a loaded question, because there's a lot of people who are very opinionated about that discussion, as far as like collabs are the best thing that's ever happened, collabs are the worst thing that's ever happened. Like, I think a lot of like, Marvel Avengers, it can either be like really great at bringing everybody together, or super conflicting because everybody's competing,
like
and
Batman versus Superman.
Yeah, and the voice just isn't firm. And I think a lot of times, like, my own personal perspective, me speaking from me, on behalf of me, the best collabs are when you have like two voices that come together to make something that neither of them can make alone, right? Like, you need to have like a brand new perspective that comes from the meeting of minds. And oftentimes when they're not very successful is because like it's two competing voices that like don't belong together, or they're too similar, so they just end up sounding like they're saying the same thing, but it's just like off.
Right.
And I think when it comes to like the purpose of collaborations, like I said, my own opinion, I think it's just another expression of like the art and moving the ball forward of, there's so many people out there that go like, what if you mashed up these two things together? Like, I can't tell you how many different times now that like, since OBJ had that Louboutin Supreme cleat, how many people are like, oh yeah, but what if you did that on a jersey? Like, what if you combined Gucci with a soccer team? What if you combine like whatever high fashion thing to
Ben & Jerry's with Air Force?
Yeah, exactly. Or Ben & Jerry's to whatever. Like, what if you mismatched the different aspects of life together? And I think like design is when you like carefully craft and articulate and communicate a specific idea for a purpose. And then oftentimes like collaborations are almost just for the art's sake of what if you brought these two things together? Like, what does that perspective look like? Is there something unique and new that comes out of it? That's totally like, nobody would ever gotten to that place if you didn't have a meeting of the minds that was like from two alternate worlds, right?
Yeah, I was just curious about your perspective on it, because I mean, I just feel like it's happening so much these days, and it's only happening more. I'd say like my opinion around it would be that like the 20th century really built so many like rigid structures, and it was like, these are the structures we're gonna have, and like because we saw some atrocities within like the 20th century, and we had to drop nuclear bombs and stuff like that, we were like, okay, let's not do that anymore, so let's build strong structures to avoid that. And I feel like now it's just like we're just like maybe these structures don't need to be as rigid and are kind of becoming more I don't know what's the word for opposite of rigid.
Free
That's what I'm looking for,
flowing,
Jay.
Flexible.
Free
basically.
flowing, right, just more free flowing and just allowing of other just other influences and just
Yeah.
right, like we built up so many resources. We're like, oh, we can share these resources. That's what I feel like is happening right now. Everyone's like, oh, I mean, I have hard stuff, you got hard stuff, like let's just make it for fun. Like, why not?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
for
even
sure.
with like Nike, before it was like, okay, we have Michael Jordan. And then now, like, it's expanded way beyond even just athletes, you know, like just on how many different collabs there are. And like, I like the point that you like brought it back to the differentiation between design being a communication and art questioning the idea. Like, I really agree. Like, I feel like so many of the collabs happen now to just question, like, what if we put these things together? Like, what does that look like? That's just cool. Do it for the culture, blah, blah, blah. The people that really care about the like seeing the scene of it happen more so than like it actually providing a value to the business and like communicating like a larger story.
Right. Yeah, because I think I'm sure you guys have probably seen on Hype Beast how many people get super duper upset over like, I can't believe my favorite brand would do this, and just
Right.
like
Right.
super angry. And I think it's really powerful because it's totally like that is one expression like I like to just call the purists, which you see it in everything, like whether it's the diehard sports fans who are like, don't change the tradition, like don't change what
change
I
the
love
logo.
about my brand, which is that everything about this idea, this company, this whatever is just like what I love, and I love it how it is. Don't change it. And like there's a certain magic that I can totally respect as far as like when something has stood the test of time, some which like the scissors or the zippers or like those perfect designs. When you change something like that that people are depending on, people are like, what the heck? Why would you do that? And some people just love the thrill of like that chaos that causes.
Right.
But like it's I think it's an important commentary on just like human beings and how we're wired, as far as like we love when things are working and we can depend on them, and when they function how they're supposed to function. But we also love new things that are exciting and different and innovative. And those two concepts in and of themselves are like on a spectrum. They're competing with each other because in order to have one, you sacrifice the other. In order to have the other, you have to sacrifice the one. And that push-pull dichotomy, like depending on how you're feeling on that day, right? It can lean one way or the other. Because the further you get into collabs and weird and like newest of the new and beyond what's maybe even appropriate, like you can dilute your brand, or people start to forget like what's the difference, or like maybe they love the new thing more than they do the old thing, and now you've created something that totally like cannibalized your brand. People are like, I don't want the old thing because the new thing honestly is better. And like that happens, right?
I think another like phenomenon I see around like you see like the high level collabs, but at the same time you're seeing exclusivity becoming more prominent. And I was just gonna ask you about we minted our first NFT last week actually. Just about like, yeah, because I mean like the future of NFTs like really are they're going to be like tokens for brands building, community building through brand. And those are like how people are going on the sneakers app and betting on shoes. Like you're going to want the NFT that came with the shoe so you could hold on to it and resell it in the future. Same type of concept. But I was just wondering, because it has so many applications, just like if and if you've thought about NFTs and like their future and like kind of what you think about it.
Yeah, I mean, NFTs is such an interesting concept as far as like they're totally like the hot thing. Like all of cryptocurrency blockchain is like, oh yeah, NFTs. It's this JPEG that you sell that anyone can have or screenshot, but like you can make a bunch of money off of it for whatever. Like I think a lot of people are like looking at it as a get rich quick scheme, which I mean, some people that's working for, but I think the unique prospect of it and like why it's been effective is, to your point, the exclusivity of like you can own a part of a blockchain, and people who understand blockchain recognize that like once you have one part of the blockchain, like there's only one of those. Like when you get your NFT minted, it is a one of one. And whenever you have a one of one of anything, like that inherently has a certain amount of value. And especially you can have a one of one of something that's like important to a lot of people, that gives it an exponential amount of value, right? And I think that what is interesting is like blockchain right now is such an abstract concept to the vast majority of people. And I include myself in the majority of people. Like, I think I understand blockchain like enough to, to just be like, yeah, I kind of like, I understand mining and blockchain. I get the gist that I could probably draw a diagram and be like, yep, that's it. No one can decrypt this except for the one person because they got the thing. They have the key to the lock. It's no one knows internet, etc. But like as far as like what's the future of it and like the economic factor and all that, I think that's like it's just unfolding right in front of our eyes. Like who knows how long like it's gonna have value. Is it gonna be, I mean, like we said, everything is editable. So like NFTs is the latest innovation in like art, commerce, digital commerce merging with cryptocurrency. Like that's just the first like spin beyond buying like tangible goods to cryptocurrency is like digital goods for crypto and being in that digital market. Whatever the next iteration of that, or like I'm assuming there will be ongoing iterations or like the alternate version of NFT, whether your NFT lives somewhere in a gallery, etc. Like that's going to continue to unfold as like society innovates off of it, with more people start questioning it and understanding it.
Yeah, it has so many possible, like right at the end at the end of what you just said, I was thinking about what if you could like, because I just thought about the metaverse and we talked about like the future of it, and I was like the metaverse being like the kind of crypto world that people live in through like their avatar. I was like, is like the avatar you make in the metaverse, is that like, could you mint that as like and just create your avatar as like an NFT? You know what I'm saying? Like a one of one of your avatar. Exactly. And I was like, oh, like that is, it was just like,
and
so
then
crazy,
like does
so
Nike make clothes, NFT clothes for your avatar?
Right, for my metaverse avatar.
30 duplicate products.
Just like, I mean, it's the same
limited
thing as
drop.
Nike making, you could buy Nike, the new Kobe's or whatever in 2K. I feel like that's kind of the same concept.
That's like the first step towards them doing NFTs, low key. Yeah.
Exactly.
And I was thinking about like, again, like a company like Nike, like what if they started doing NFTs? Like what if the LeBron like fitness billboard that like you can buy that as like an NFT and like doing stuff like that, it'd be crazy. Nike, you know what I'm saying? I mean, I got my ideas.
I mean, the NBA, I feel like the NBA right now is like the forerunner in that in like the big corporate space. Like the NBA's just dropped like, all right, we're gonna drop these NFTs, and they're already like all of them bid at $1 million plus, like suit, like just like that. So I think it's gonna take we'll see who wants to jump out at like as the first kind of corporations, NBA being the first one, who's gonna kind of come next is like, we'll put our hat in the ring, like y'all could buy NFTs.
I saw Hypebeast is actually making NFTs. Did you see that?
Yeah,
I just saw that like yesterday.
I didn't see it, but
I mean, it's crazy. Like I said, the future of it is definitely going to be unlimited. I can't tell you what Nike's going to do because I mean, you know, that's beyond me. You'll have to talk to John Donahoe or somebody like that. But I am more than excited for definitely what we're going to bring to the future, for sure.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what, because I know Nike's going to bring some stuff. I know you can't speak on it, but it's going to be.
He's sitting there like, yeah, we don't
But yeah, it's gonna be really cool. All right, well, I don't want to take up too much of your time. We really thank you so much for coming and speaking with us today. You always drop really good gems. Always explain it nice and thoroughly. So we appreciate your time, man.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm more than happy to give back. I feel like this definitely gives me life. Like, it's also really easy to talk passionately about design and feature and creative concepts and just what I do. And I think like that's part of what makes me different and what I get to contribute to the different community.
Yeah. Well, there you go. I mean, that was going to be like going into like the last question we like to ask everybody is like, what's your definition of different? Could you just like kind of expand on that as like far as like that question of like what makes you different? Like, what do you like kind of define as like your definition of it?
Yeah. So my definition of different and like what makes me different, I think I'm just gonna take it full circle back to the beginning. I think what makes me different is just how I approach work and how I approach my life. And I love the fact that as the challenges come up, as the hard things come up in life, like you get to find more of yourself in things. Like, you know, they say like so much of life is just a reflection of you back on the world, back to yourself. And I feel like over time, I'm just starting to learn like more and more of that's true. And another aspect of that is like you get to assign meaning. And I think in assigning meaning, like that's what we do with design and all the things that we create and, you know, just how we identify ourselves and how we can grow and change and become different people. And I think to summarize everything that could possibly entail, you know, I think it's going to be interesting to see all the different types of people you are going to end up becoming over the course of time, and how much of design and creating and the world that unfolds is going to remind you of who you always have been and who you are and who you're going to be. That's what different is to me.
Well, that is a wonderful answer. Thank you so much. I'd just like to even just say off that, I really love that answer because it just really like, it touched like exactly why like we started this and like what our almost kind of what our definition of different is just that it's the process, it's the way that you carry yourself, is the way you go about everything. Bonum optimus modus vivendi, good to optimal way of living. So yeah, 100%, man. 100%. So I just lastly, if anybody's curious about finding you or any of your work, could you just like drop, if anybody's looking for it, where they can find you?
Absolutely. I'm getting ready to launch my personal website, DarryleHawkins.com. You can also find me on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. I be tweeting stuff every once in a while at I'm Daryle Hawkins, DarylehHawkins. I got a pretty unique spelling, so there's not too many Daryls with the E. But you know, you can catch me there or on LinkedIn. Like, where the professionals are at.
Yes, sir. And your message for all the people, if you're listening to this, there are people out here like Daryle who will respond to your message. If you're wondering how we're able to speak to him, I sent him a message and said, I'd love to learn from you and what you do. And he was gracious enough to give us our time and give you these gems. So if you're listening to this, it is possible. Just all you need to do is ask. There are people who will teach you and give you whatever you need. So again, thank you, Daryle, for being that for us. And yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Absolutely. And best of luck.